A long time ago, when I was in junior high school, before they started teaching the importance of an all-powerful federal government in a disposable society and how to debunk self-evident truths, they used to separate the boys and girls based on their reproductive organs, and they'd send the girls to home ec, where they learned to cook, sew, and how to manage the affairs of a household and how to raise a family. And the boys, they'd get sent to IA. IA stood for Industrial Arts, but everyone just called it shop. You learned how to fix things and how to make things, how to use hand tools and power tools, how to work with wood, and how to work with metal. The kind of skills you'd need to keep life going in a modern world. I can't find the nuts and washers. I'm talking about a time when a can of mixed nuts was a coffee can full of old nuts, bolts, washers, and screws, not something you ate. And if you had to buy missing nuts, it was easy. You just measured the major thread diameter and went to the hardware store. And every hardware store had nuts and bolts. I'll get washers for these later. The only question was coarse thread or fine. And nobody used fine threads for anything unless they had to. So that made it easy. Of course, this was back before Jimmy Carter's disastrous attempt to convert the United States to metric. Ever since then, we've had to have two sets of tools, one imperial and one metric. But I digress. What was my point of all this? Oh yeah, I remember. We learned how to use tools, hand tools and power tools, and the importance of using the right tool for the job. Like never use pliers to tighten nuts. And we'd sit around these workbenches in groups of 4. The workbenches had big, thick maple butcher block tops on them. About 30 years ago, one of those schools closed, and they sold off their shop, and somebody bought the maple tops from the workbenches, and they stored them for 15 years and never did anything with them. And they sold them to someone else who stored them for another 15 years. By the time they found their way here, it was just a big jumbled up pile of heavy wood. It took us about 3 evenings of heavy lifting to get this wood sorted back into its original tabletops. We tried just bolting it together randomly, but the holes aren't all drilled exactly the same heights. They're match drilled, and it wasn't possible. It took a long time because we had to match up the paint marks, the sanding marks, the glue drips, and the holes in order to get all the wood back in its original position. And each one of these pieces probably weighs 4 pounds. It was like a jigsaw puzzle that weighed 500 pounds. It's enough maple to build 4 bench tops 30 inches wide and 5 feet long, with leftover material to make a shelf along the back. It's going to take a little while to finish putting these together, but when they're done, it'll be great to have the workbench space. It brings back a lot of fond memories. Like the time one of the kids at my table took a power belt sander, plugged it into a 30-foot extension cord, plugged it into the wall, put it on the floor, sat on it, and pulled the trigger and rode the belt sander across the tile floor. It burned an 8-inch patch in the tile from one end of the room to the other, and the teacher was only out of the room for a couple of minutes. After that, we got to spend the next week drilling out defects in the bench tops and pounding in maple plugs. Yeah, those were the days.